Now, we're recording this session and we're just going to step through and talk about the Term 2 project requirements. Let's go back and have a look at our starting point. When we go back into our course and we look at the requirements, it's this page right here. Now, the two units it's addressing are labelled up the top. It's capture a digital image and produce and prepare photo images. We're teaching those two units and assessing them holistically together because there's a lot of overlap. We have some background information. The relevant thing is the reason we're doing these projects is about you applying what you have learned as a communication tool with a group of people and then do some analysis to work out how is it working for you. Because we want you thinking about these techniques. Now, when we come down to our instructions down here, this is what I'm going to spend some time on tonight. My fear is that people are making this job more complex than what it needs to be. What we have here is a matrix where we can go through and brainstorm what have we done, what are the tools and techniques that we've applied, get all of our thoughts together, and then down the bottom down here, we're just asking some questions about that brainstorming. So what I've done is copied that out and I've dropped it into a Word document that I want to show you, and I've got it just over here. So here's the same content dropped into a Word document where I've actually started adding in a little bit of extra content for you to have a look at. First thing I wanted to point out to you, hopefully you've noticed now that where it said Tool 1, Tool 2 and Tool 3 across the top, I've changed it. I've started putting in what were the tools that I used during the course of my project work. And that was just a straight brainstorming job. So, all right, the tools I used, well, screenshots. It sounds it's not really a tool, it's more of a technique, but I thought, well, hey, it probably fits pretty well there.
I think it's a tool.
Scanning. Scanning is a definite technique and it relates to a number of tools. I had a heading just here, I had smartphones, and I thought, well, hang on a second, isn't a smartphone in relation to this unit just another example of a camera? So you'll see that I've now got cameras, and down below down here I've listed smartphones. I've got organising pictures, and I've got editing pictures. So I'm thinking, if you look back through the content of the work we've covered this term, those are the tools and techniques we've been focusing on. Now, we've done lots of examples related to each one and lots of different ways of using each tool or technique, but that's basically how it broke up. So, I then started down to the next stage, and I started looking over here, so these descriptions, these features we were talking about. And one of the things, I hope I've made clear as we've gone through, the structure that we put up here is a guide. We want to encourage you to change that structure to suit your project. The important thing to achieve by this project is that you've experimented with a whole range of tools and techniques, you've learned something from it, you've analysed the situation and you've made a judgment. That's what we're trying to achieve. So that means if you need to go and change this matrix to work for you, then that's exactly what you should be looking at doing. Now, the first point here was use a variety of image capture tools, example cameras, screen captures, etc. Now, when I started looking at that for me, if I was doing the project, I thought, hang on a second, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So what I've done, I've just changed that and I've said I'm going to get rid of that bit. I'm just going to call that category there tools, both hardware and software. Now, once I've done that, looking at the different categories, now I can go and identify some specifics. So in terms of screenshots, what were the tools, either hardware or software, that I used to capture screenshots? Well, I used my laptop, I used my desktop PC, I used my iPad and I used my iPhone. So those are the tools that I used to capture screenshots, shots that I wanted to share with people. And then I thought, well, okay, if the scanning that I've done, what scanning tools have I used? Well, I used the big Xerox multifunction center that I just showed you in that photo a few moments ago in the office. And I think you're going to find that a lot of people have forgotten how many different scanners and techniques they've used. I've got a little Canon scanner that I use at home all the time for doing photos. Beautiful little scanner, dirt cheap, it's only about $100, but does a good job in photos. I've got quite a nice little Xerox desktop scanner at home. Not as big and as fancy as the ones we've got at work, but it's still quite functional. I use that. So those were the different scanning tools that I've actually used. So I just made a list of them. And it was interesting, when I got into that and I put down the first tool, suddenly thought, oh yeah, but there's that other one I used as well. It's only when you start the brainstorming that it all starts coming out. And Chris, you're sitting here, as I was going through that, you said, oh, I've used that as well. But you hadn't thought of that, had you?
No,
because we hadn't done the brainstorming bit. All right, then I came across, okay, my next category, I had cameras. And I thought, well, okay, what cameras have I been using through the course of this project? Well, I've got my little smartphone, and it's an iPhone, so I'll just make a note of that there. I've got an iPad. I've got the little Lumix, Panasonic Lumix. Now, I'm not practicing very good practice here. I would hope that you will go through and actually give it the correct model number. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but you'll be able to fill those bits in. And I've got a Canon digital SLR that I use at home. And actually, I just remembered, I've also been using the Nikon digital SLR here at work as well. So straight away, you can see I've used a fair number of different cameras. So now I've got a record of that. Then I came across and I thought, okay, to organise my pictures so that I can find them and work with them, what were the actual tools, either hardware or software I used to do that? Now, in reality, it's probably going to come down to mainly software, although I just had a brainstorm just then of another one that I've missed. So what have I been using? Well, I've been using Picasa, because Picasa has this great technique where you can add in keywords and file names and folder names and then search against them. So I thought to myself, well, hey, that does a lot of my work for organising my photos in one go. The other obvious one is that I have a structure, I have an organised way of storing my photos. So I've got that one, and the other one I've got down here, I'm just going to make a note here now, an external hard disk drive. I use an external hard disk drive all the time to store my photos. That's how I do my backups. And see there again, because I hadn't gotten into the brainstorming thing, I've forgotten about it. And the other one I use is a USB drive. And again, I'd forgotten it. And iCloud, there you go. So can you see that as you get into this stage, you suddenly start realising, wow, I've been really busy. I've actually been using a lot of tools and a lot of different techniques. But because I hadn't taken the time to brainstorm my way through it, I'd forgotten how much I'd done. Now, over here in terms of editing pictures, what have I used to edit the pictures? Hardware and software. For me, it's software. I've been using Picasa, good old trusty Picasa. I use Photoshop. I also use a program, not very often nowadays, but I use a program called OpenView. I haven't brought it up in the course yet, but OpenView is a free download. It's actually really, really good for doing batch processing of large numbers of photos. It'll open virtually any image type you ever name, it'll open it up and display it for you. And again, you can do simple little edits with it. So it's not a bad little tool. So I thought, let's list that one as well. So you can see straight away, I've got a bit of structure. And I'm feeling better about that because all of a sudden I'm now starting to realise that, gee, I've done more than I thought I had. I just hadn't really taken time to get it down anywhere. Now the next point coming down here, it said use cameras in a variety of modes. But then I looked at that and I thought, well, hang on a second. Now that I've rearranged my structure of this matrix, that's probably not a very smart way of describing that. So why don't I change to use cameras in a variety of modes? I'm going to change it to a heading of modes and options. Because modes and options applies to a whole range of different tools and techniques, doesn't it? Yeah. It's a more general term. So you can see that I'm adapting my matrix as I go through this. Now the last thing I want to do is be prescriptive and say, okay, just because George is doing it this way now, that's the way I've got to do it. That's not what I want to achieve at all. But I want to show you how you can take a basic matrix and then modify it to fit what you've done. Okay, so let's think about it. Modes and options. Screenshots, look, I didn't put anything down because that's pretty basic. It's pretty much only one way to do it. Scanning though, hang on, there's lots of options And here I just thought of more straight away, and while I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of more. Modes and options when I'm scanning, well, you can have grayscale, black and white, and full colour, 24-bit colour. But the other obvious one is we can have resolution, can't we? And see, when I went through and did this a few minutes ago, I forgot to put that down. And here's the other mode and option that I've got when I'm scanning. I can choose what file type to save to. And there you go, just thought of another one. I'm still sitting here. I can do single pages or double-sided. So isn't it funny, you start into this stuff, it's something you need to come back to. You put down a couple of things like any good brainstorming session and you suddenly realise, oh, there was another 5 things I forgot to put down. So I would really encourage you that as you do this, share what you're doing with the rest of the people in the class because they'll probably remind you of another 5 things you've forgotten about.
That's true.
Now, cameras. Modes and options in cameras. Okay, here we go. Here's my matrix. Well, look, I use sport, I use auto, I use full manual. Now, I use full manual when I'm using the Canon Digital SLR. I also use aperture priority and shutter priority. We haven't gone into that in a lot of depth in this particular course, although it's covered off in the readings, because we had a limited amount of time, but you're aware of what the concepts are. But a lot of you may have done that outside of this course as well. So don't hesitate to put in what you've done, no matter where you've learned about it. I've also put in flash on and flash off. Now, I'm sure if I spent a few minutes more, I could probably come up with other modes and options that I use when I use a camera. But that's not a bad starting point. Yeah. Now, in terms of organising pictures, to be honest, I couldn't think of anything. I just left it blank. And editing pictures, modes and options. There's an obvious one. When you're using Photoshop, Casey showed us. Remember, she showed us how to use layers. She showed us how to use levels and text. You remember she showed us how to do the buttons?
I wasn't here for that.
She's got it recorded though. It's in the recordings, you can come back to it. So you can see here modes and options. There's some things straight away. Now, in terms of this here, to be clear, I probably should have put in here at the beginning of that, this is the Photoshop bit, and it's layers, levels and text. And when I come down to Picasso, because that's the other tool I've been using crop, I've been using light, colour, and again, I'm just going to list out what are all the different things I've done. Oh, straighten, of course. I keep forgetting about straighten, great tool. And the other one, what's the other one I keep doing all the time? Oh, I add text in all the time. It's a really common one. So can you see as I start brainstorming and thinking, okay, what are the things that I often do? There's my list is growing in front of me. Now, I'm not going to go down too many more. The point that I want to drive home is that this is about brainstorming to get your thoughts together about what have I learned to do, or what did I already know how to do, but it gets it all into one's point. Yeah. I suspect that if everybody spends a little bit of time doing this bit, apart from anything else, they're going to feel incredibly reassured that, God, I've learned a lot, and I actually know a lot of stuff. It's just that I've been so preoccupied worrying about the things that I don't know yet, that I haven't really been thinking very clearly about what I have already learnt. So that's what that's about. Now, one other one, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. The next one down here is experiment with a variety of compositional techniques. So composition. So composition is about how you structure an image, about how, what fits into the frame and what doesn't fit into the frame. So I started thinking through, okay, how does that relate to a screenshot? And I thought, well, straight away, I do it all the time and I don't even think about it. I'll often take a screenshot, drop it into an email or drop it into a Word document, and the first thing I do is I go in there and I actually crop it down to show just the bit I want. That's actually a compositional technique, isn't it? Composition is about what fits into my frame and what doesn't. Yep. It's almost like in terms of project management, it's about scope, isn't it? What fits into this job, what doesn't fit into the job. Now, in terms of scanning, I would say it's the exact same thing. It's crop. It's probably the compositional technique we're using. Because one of the things you're going to learn about scanning, especially when you get into books, you don't want to waste a lot of time storing all that white space around your text. Crop it out using Adobe Acrobat and drop your file size back under control. Now, when I start getting into cameras, now whether it's a smartphone, an iPhone, any of these different cameras up here, when I start coming up with my compositional techniques, then I'm starting to build a really big list, don't I? So you start thinking about, okay, even simple things, when I'm taking photos of a smartboard, I'll often have my camera out, and you'll see me, moving around, and what I'm actually looking for is how can I get the photo to make sure there's no reflections or glare on the board there. That's actually a compositional technique, isn't it? The thing is, you don't think about it that way at the time, but that's what you're doing. You're adjusting the composition of the image. When I get a chance, and I really, really enjoy this, but I find it hard time-wise, when I get a chance to go out and just really enjoy photography, I love to get out there and practice all those classic compositional techniques, like framing my images, using perspective to add a sense of depth, using contrast, working in macro. I enjoy all of those things, using depth of field. Those are all compositional techniques that you can refer to. And there is a huge body of resources online that you can look at, including a lot of the ones we've already showed you, but others as well, that will talk about composition and photography. So I would suggest that you will have no trouble filling up that section at all. In fact, you might get it so full that you can't fit it all in. So just be aware of that. Now, in terms of organising my pictures, I'm going to change that again. See, straight away, can you see this is a dynamic document, isn't it? This is all about file management, isn't it? Let's put that up there. Organising pictures and file management. I don't think there's anything relevant to composition in terms of file management. Right, so I'm going to leave that one blank. And in terms of editing pictures, look, I could put in all of those things that we've talked about before up here. The light, the colour adjustment. That light refers to composition in a sense. Cropping certainly does, and layers certainly does. So composition, what fits into the image, what do you leave out? So what I'm hoping to strike home by this is, don't look at this matrix and think that it's written in stone and you can't change it. I want you to change it. I want you to adapt this matrix so that you can have a really, really good brainstorming session and identify all those great things that you know. That's what the job's about. Now, before I finish up, let's leave that behind. I'm going to trust you guys to go wild and get in there and be creative and share your work with each other and ask for advice. Let's answer some questions. Hardware. Briefly describe the digital imaging hardware that you required for this trial. Well, can you see that my brainstorming has actually helped me? Because think about it. What was the first thing we put down? We put down all the cameras. Well, cameras are an example of hardware, aren't they? So up here, I could copy out all of that top section up there. I could copy that, and I can come down to my question down here about hardware. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that in just as text. So there's a right click and paste as text. 1 second. Work very well. We do it this way, it'll be safer. As soon as you start recording, everything goes a bit slower. So I'm just going to paste that in as text. There we go, okay. Now, because I've done all of those things, can you see all my content is now dropped in here? This is all the hardware I used. Now, straight away I'd go through there and I would get rid of everything that's not hardware. So folder structure is not relevant. So I'll delete that out. I'll delete out Picasa because that's not hardware. So I'll get rid of everything that's software. I'd get rid of Picasa and iCloud because they're not hardware based. Not in terms of the interface you see, I'll get rid of Photoshop. You can see I'm cleaning that up. What I'm left with is all the different hardware items I've been using. Now, all I would do then is, because I've been nagging at you about being more descriptive in terms of the terminology to describe the equipment that you use. What's the hardware that you use? So it's an Acer 15-inch laptop. It's a 2.4 gigahertz. It has 2 gigabytes of RAM. Can you see that I'm trying to be quite descriptive now? Because I want to become more confident in how I describe the equipment that I use. The iPad, where it's an iPad 2 and with Wi-Fi and 3G, so I can put that in. My iPhone, the Xerox Multifunction Center, what's the actual brand and model? So again, I'm trying to get people to be much more descriptive so that they can then sustain a conversation with people to get tech support and actually describe what's the gear that you're using, what's the brand and model, you know, what are the components inside it, you know, in broad terms. So there's my section on hardware. That's all I need. I don't need a big long essay about it. I just want you to describe what's the hardware you've used.
I've already written an essay.
Sorry?
I've already written an essay.
You've already written an essay. That's okay. You can give me an essay as well, but let's not make life too hard for yourself. Okay, software. Now, I've already done my brainstorming. What's the software I talked about? I talked about Picasa, Photoshop, and OpenView.
Yeah.
And straight away I would put in there. And if you're going to describe software, then you'd probably want to talk about what's the name of the product and the version that you're running, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because again, we're trying to be quite accurate. So I'm sure we can answer that one. Now, this is where we're getting down here to being a little bit more descriptive. Insert images into this report to illustrate the trial work you have undertaken. So when you think back on what you've done in this brainstorming, it may well be that you've had a group of students that you've been working with and you've been using some of these techniques. Why not give me some example photographs to show me what you've been doing? So Chris, for you told me the other day you've been taking photos of whiteboards.
Yep.
You told me you've been doing some copying or scanning, didn't you?
Yep.
Why not give me a couple of examples of what you did?
Okay.
Drop it in.
How many? Like how much?
Just enough to illustrate what you're doing.
Just a
I don't
demonstration.
need to see 10 photos of a whiteboard. If you show me one photo of a whiteboard with notes on it, you've already proven to me that, hey, this is what I've been doing. That's all I need to know. You know, a photo showing some scanning you've done, maybe a photo of the camera that you've been using, or the cameras you've been using.
Okay.
Do something simple. Put all the cameras you've been using on top of a table, take a photo of the whole lot. So I think that can become a very simple process as well. Because remember, in terms of what I'm looking for, I just want to see some evidence that that you've been working through this and what you've learned from it. Now here's the interesting one, and this is the one where I'm not sure whether people have been doing this. I know I've nagged at you all a lot. I think feedback is the critical missing element from any team working or collaboration situation. Now, I know it's the missing link in education, but I think it's the same in any project operation that you ever run. You need to be gathering feedback from the people you're working with. You need to be taking the time, and I believe it's a courtesy thing as well, that you ask them, hey, how's this working for you? Is this okay? And we have to show them the respect of listening to them. So what I'm asking you to do is that as you use these techniques with other people, you're going to talk to them and say, get some feedback, and I want to hear what the comments are. Because I think all of us need to hear what the comments are. The same way for Casey and I on this particular job, we need to know what your feedback is about how this is working for you as well.
I'm just wondering how I do that. I need to get on my page.
For those of you online, if you can't, Chris is just saying she's just wondering how can you do that.
I know I'll find one.
I know you'll find a way, but hey, a simple round the table conversation with a group of people and say, hey, these are some of the things that I've been doing, experimenting with you. Can you just tell me what do you think about these? And put down some dot point notes. There's a really, really simple method. If you want to get a little bit more fancy, why not think about creating a survey, monkey survey, and ask them some questions. How would you rate the effectiveness of this? You know, 1 to 5, something like that. Again, don't make this into rocket science. It's not meant to be complex. It's just meant to be you listening to their views and then reflecting on that. So we're almost there. So we're now down to the last part of the report. The report is, the conclusion of the report is reflect on all of these factors and write a report on which of these tools you'll continue to use on a regular basis. Because my prediction from what we've done, we've shown you a whole range of things. I think it's realistic to expect that some of those things you're going to think, you beauty, this works perfectly for me, and I'm going to keep doing this one all the time. Because, you know, this is an easy win. And there may well be others that it won't fit for your situation. Now, all I'm asking you to do is to reflect back on all these things that you've experimented with, and you tell me, what are going to be the ones that you're going to take forward? Why? Was it because it was really quick and easy, or was it because, look, it was a bit of work for me, but the group of people I'm working with found this really, really good, and therefore it's worth persevering because it's good for them? So I'm looking for the why will you take that forward. If a technique that you've been experimenting with didn't work for you, tell me why. If you're going to drop that technique, if, for example, you decide that, look, I'm not going to waste time scanning pages out of books, there's a better way of doing that, fine. Explain to me why you're going to drop it. So this is that summary. Now, I would expect, looking at all of this, someone's bound to ask me the question, you know, how many pages am I looking for? And the answer is, I'm not going to judge it on, I'm not going to mark this by the kilo. A person that submits 20 pages is not guaranteed to get a better mark than a person that submits 5 pages. If you submit half a page, I'm going to find it very, very difficult to believe that anyone's done any in-depth analysis. But if you have a look at what I've done here with you tonight, just in the few minutes that we've been recording this for about 35, 40 minutes, and if you have a look at this already, I'm already up to 3 pages and I've only got dot points. You're not going to have any problems at all generating about 5 pages or so. I would be very surprised when you get down to this conclusion stage, everything above here can be pretty much dot point. I'm not looking for essays. When you get to your conclusion, you're going to explain something to me. I would be surprised if you could do that in anything less than a page, because there's a fair few factors for you to reflect on. So, you know, if it's about a page, 2 pages will be absolute outside. If you're writing 20 pages for your conclusion, I suspect you are over-analysing the situation and you need to cut back to the reality of this thing. This is not meant to be that big.
You just say you need to get a mark.
I'm trying to find a polite way of saying that you need to get a life if you're going that wild on it. Alrighty. So look, there's my coverage on the project requirements. My fears are that people are going to overcomplicate this. That's why I've recorded this session, because I want to get people grounded. Just to recap on the main points, this matrix that we started talking about up here is not written in stone. I expect you to modify it to make it work for your situation. It is just a brainstorming tool for you to gather your thoughts about what you've learned and what you've done. That's all it is. These questions down the bottom, most of these points down the bottom can be answered in dot point, and I'm not looking for essays in your explanations. And in the conclusion, I'm looking for 1 page or so where you're going to give me an opinion and explain why you think something. So hopefully that gives you a fairly good basis to go forward from here. And again, if you have any problems, talk to Casey and I, have a yarn to us, and we'll give you some advice. And so far, if you look at all the advice that we've offered, it has all been around, hey, take a breath, it's not as complex as what you're making this job for yourself. Just tone it down, let's make it work.